Hello, it's Adam Stevenson, the Grub Street Lodger, and I am here in the dark, and it has to be said, the cold. I'm rather chilly right this second, I don't know why, but I'm going to talk about what I read in January. And to start off, we have The Secret River by Kate Grenville. And something special about this is it was bought for me for Christmas. And you might think, well, look, you like books. Yeah, but I never get them for Christmas. For quite a few years now. Partly because people don't know whether I've already got it, but also that my family think I probably don't need any more, which I can understand, though I disagree. But my mum got me this for Christmas. Well, my mum and dad, but she picked it, and she picked it through a really weird way that she'd been watching these TV programs about books, and I'd sort of made little notes on the ones that interested me, and she'd gone through it and went, I'll get this one. So I'd read The Lieutenant before, a few years ago, but I hadn't read this one, and it's based on her family history in some way. So it's about a Thames waterman who commits a crime in England, and he is transported to Australia, and he works for a while in Sydney, and then he moves to the secret river, the Hawkesbury, where he claims a bit of land. And he's never had anything of his own before, so when he claims it, and it's his, and it's his future, it means an awful lot to him. There's just one other problem. The people already living there, or the people living in the area, who take that place as a stop on their journey throughout the year, and he has to decide: am I going to live peacefully with these people? Am I going to commit violence against them and claim this place as my own? Something I found really interesting. It was really well written. It was really entertaining. It got you in that sort of mindset of, these people have never had anything. The people from London never had anything of their own, and now there's this land and they can have it. And you kind of get where, they're not trying for some big grand colony, spread of the British Empire kind of idea. It's just their chance to get something, and I completely get that, because I'm looking at a chance to buy a house soon, and just the idea of having a little area that's mine, that I'm not renting, or so I get it. But at the same time, I think it's interesting that it started off as family history and became a novel, because at the end of this novel, our main character, William Thornhill, he's in his grand house that doesn't quite fit together, big stone house. He's the king of the river, and he feels unease about how he got to where he is, and the atrocity he took part in. And I have to say, I imagine that her ancestors felt no unease. I think it's become fiction, so that they can have thoughts that I think the real people may not have. I think the people that came and grabbed the land did so and probably didn't feel very guilty about it, but the characters in the book can. But yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know much about Australian history, but it brought a little bit of it to life, and just the sad and inevitable way these two cultures clash into each other, because they have very different views on what life is and what's important, and how to live, and it's gonna collide, and it did. Now, the next book is unusual, because the author sent me this. The author is called Alex Burrett, and the book is called Outstared by a Bullfrog. And he sent it to me after I wrote a review on Goodreads about his short stories, My Goat Ate Its Own Legs, which I very much enjoyed for their ideas but wanted more story. So he sent this to me going, well, here's a novel's worth more story. And it's a sort of goofy metaphysical romp, I suppose. So it starts with the main character masturbating and God checking in on him. And as a result, he thinks that God is very interested in his life. And he talks about elements of his life and how it's all kind of gone wrong. And at one point, he's thrown out of a window, And in this sort of between life and death state, he can revisit bits of his own life. And as he does so, he finds there's another little face that's been following him around. And it's all very peculiar. And he so he discovers that all the gods in the world are just giants on giant kids on a day trip. Yeah, and you got one that's the Norse gods and Thor and that, and you got the Greek gods, and you got the monotheistic god, and actually his personal god is the little disabled kid who can't move very far from the truck. That's the one who's been keeping an eye on him, which might explain some of his luck. And it's obviously self-published, because you could never publish this book. It's way too strange and wacky and very, very personal. And as such, I mean, I found it too horny. For example, there's just too much about sex in it that just kind of put me off a bit. At one point, he's in a coma and he's revived because someone gives him a hand job. There's all this kind of stuff, and it's a little bit sort of down the pub tee-hee-hee, locker room type. It's not my kind of thing, that. But then at the same time, there was this whole peculiar metaphysical adventure, which ended with him in the land of the gods being held by the one that, the Judeo-Christian God, and Islamic indeed, the Abrahamic religious God, who has him in his hand and is about to sort of tear him apart like a kid tearing wings off a fly. But he won't do it as long as the main character is staring at him. And the main character says, I've had a lot of practice at staring. So it ends with him staring God down, which is a really cool ending. I like that a lot. So, it's a very... it's kind of difficult for me to talk about in some ways, because there's loads of bits I like, loads of bits I don't like. And also the fact that it just couldn't exist without this guy creating it himself. And he's got a whole bunch of other, I imagine, equally weird and wonderful things going. He's got a whole bunch of pages. So if you want to check Alex Burrett out, it's not always the most sophisticated, but it's a kind of wacky inventiveness that just doesn't pass through a publishing house. So you get something, you get a very different flavour. It's very cool. Then I read Jumanji. It's by Chris Van Allsburg. It's this very short picture book. I find it weird how sort of grim and grey the pictures are, considering they're all about jungle animals coming out and going into a house. There's not as much story in this, obviously, as the film, and there's not as much tension really, because each dice roll resets the whole thing. So there are monkeys, but then you throw the dice and the monkeys sort of disappear, and like in the film, the monkeys keep going, you gotta roll the dice whilst dealing with the monkeys and the lions. There's not that kind of accumulation. My biggest wonder is, I mean, these are beautiful illustrations, but they're so dark and monotone. I think that's a bit peculiar. That's a bit weird, but there you go. So the next thing. So my plan this year is to read big sort of series and big books, that the kind that I would always fancy getting around to but never would get around to. This would be the year I'll get around to it. And whether that'll be possible with some of my plans for this year, who knows. But I started with this chunk here. They're called Patterns of Love. 1, 2, and 3. I got them from Scoob Books, and they are by the what is it? The United Writers of Cornwall, which is a vanity publishing company, and I think it clearly was then, because this is just typed. That's just a typewritten page that's been put in there. And there's 3 books of this dense typed page. And then it came with this very peculiar dedication, in which he says he would dedicate the book to someone, but that person would probably hate it, and that everybody he's shown these books to have hated it and disagreed with him. And then he just says about how he has based some of the stuff in the books on real life, but he's mostly made it up. He being Oliver Other, which that's a pen name. There is no way there's a real person called Oliver Other. So there's this pen name. It's self-printed. It's got this very sort of defensive, very defensive kind of writing in the dedication, and then at the end, weirdly, gives you some of the main characters' birthdays, so you know when their star sign is. And then my copy had some newspaper clippings, and they're from the Sunday Times and the Financial Times. They're not exactly reviews, but what they are is essentially this person's press release. Patterns of Love, the longest British novel to date. Not true, but over 500,000 words. A comprehensive profile of British society. As conscientious as the philosophies of Nietzsche and Marx, as beautifully simple as a haiku, will shock, reveal, compel, and overwhelm by turns. And that's from the press release. And he's got this press release published in newspapers as if they're reviews. So I think he's got some kind of connection with newspapers, this mysterious author. I also think he's dead, and these are his copies. Because who else would keep those press cuttings? So I think I have Oliver Other's own copies, and I imagine there aren't many others there. So, what is this peculiar set of books? Well, the first one, Patterns of Love, starts with Robin and Charles. They are two schoolboys. They go to a very, very prestigious public, private school, but we call them public schools because we're weird, in Amersham, and it's very old school, very Eton. The older kids have servants that are called fags, who make them tea and do their jobs for them, and they're allowed to beat their fags, and it's all all the curriculum is all Thucydides and Latin and Greek and old dead stuff that doesn't mean anything anymore. Probably quite interesting. And so Robin has a schoolboy crush on Charles because Charles is basically perfect. Aside from a stutter, he is perfect at everything. He looks perfect. He looks like statue of Apollo, a very specific statue of Apollo that gets mentioned all the time. But he's a perfect shot. He's a perfect boxer. He's clever. He speaks about 6 languages. He's just perfect at everything. He's a bit duff at maths. Whereas Robin is he's a poor kid in this thing because his dad owns a print works. So yeah, he's the owner of a kind of a factory, but still trade. So he's like the poor relation. And Charles influences Robin and makes Robin feel that he can do more in his life. Also, Charles has a problem. He refuses to knock people out in one punch in boxing matches, and as a result has to go to the boxing, the kid head of the boxing, who beats him and does weird sexual things with him. It's implied buggery, but maybe more. And Charles doesn't want to tell on this person who's sexually abusing him because he feels that if he does that, then the person who's sexually abusing him will lose all sort of belief in humanity and will never develop into a better person. So he tries to keep it quiet, but then it all comes to a head, and one person gets their head knocked in, and that's not Charles, because nothing bad ever happens to Charles really, except for this buggering. But on the whole, Charles is a wunderkind. Everything, he's great at everything. The next one is Robin and Angela, which is they're a little bit older. Robin is in Cambridge. He's unbeknownst to him flying through university, and it's like, wow, I'm gonna do more with my life than become a print shop manager. But then his parents and a woman called Angela sort of ensnare him. Angela gets him drunk, rapes him, and then blackmails him into marrying her over a kid that doesn't even exist. And he ends up being tied to the job, tied to the woman, and tied to a tiny house, and he hates it all. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Charles, the wonderkind, of course, he goes off and has a great career. He's a newspaper, he's a foreign correspondent for a newspaper, and I think the writers got a connection with newspapers, hence, the press releases in the Times is. But this newspaper is Charles can't work for an ordinary newspaper. He's got to work for one that is too good to actually exist. And this is called The Truth, and it's the perfect unbiased newspaper. And he works for them. And when he comes back to London, he goes to this prostitute called Charlotte, who he's asked to marry her about 27 times. She doesn't, because she loves him too much and doesn't want to inflict herself on him. But then when he's away in Vietnam, he gets blown up and he loses his eyesight. And that makes her realise that she loves him, and it ends with them getting married. And it's a very happy ending for them. So we move on to the next book called Apple Charlotte. And so we start off with Robin. It's 7 years later. This book is organised in 7 years. 7 years later, and the company's gone down for Robin. His dad died, taking it with him. His wife has left him, taking everything from the house that he hated anyway. And he's made himself what he calls idiot dumplings, which are many sort of paracetamols all mushed together that he kills himself with. And it was a bit weird, because Robin is our entry character in the first book. He's the person we meet first and whose point of view we have, but now he's dead and it's the Charles show, which is a bit of a shame because Charles is a bit of a know-it-all goody-goody. Charles, he's lost his sight, but he's regained sort of autonomy quicker than anybody ever has before. He's written a best-selling book, of course. He's bought a farm called Merrydown where he and his wife Charlotte are in complete and total love. They raise black hens that have beautiful eggs that are nicest eggs ever, and they're developing the Charlemagne Nonpareil apple, which is the tastiest apple ever. And we get 100 pages of just like There's 7 pages just about the pots and pans in their kitchen, because everything in Merrydown is basically heaven on earth, which is to say it's old fashioned, it's classy, and it's all the best of everything. And their friends come, and it's a healing place for them. And even there's a sort of evil brother of Charlotte who comes called St. John, and he is healed by this place, and everything's wonderful. And on the 7th anniversary of their wedding, Charlotte says she's going to have a baby, and everybody is so happy. The entire village go to the church and they sing hymns until dawn. Everybody's so delighted. The next day, he and Charlotte go to town, and Charlotte is decapitated in a road accident, and so that's that. Weirdly, the sadness does not last long, because Charlie, he feels very, he's completely broken apart, but then he realises, no, he loves God and he loves Charlotte, and Charlotte will come back to him. And so that night, Charlotte comes back to him and resides in his breast, so he will never be sad anymore, because he's always with Charlotte, more than even when she was alive. And so that isn't the big drama that happens. No, this unleashes the real enemy, the welfare state. And this is where we get the politics that the author said no one liked about the book. At this point, it's death duty. So death duty takes all of the estate, it takes all of his wealth, and he has to move to a tiny flat in London and lose everything. And all of his friends who loved coming there, they can't come there anymore, and that's all bad. What's more, there is what is described in the book as a mongoloid boy who has been sort of coming to the farm, but now Charlie's not there. There's no one to look after him, and he dies as well as his little dog, and that's the ending of that. Now we get on to this one, Amongst the Olive Groves, and it descends into the absurd, racist, right-wing dystopia. Well, the dystopia's not right-wing, the dystopia's left-wing, but it's a right-wing view. Essentially, every character who we've met who likes Charlie dies or moves at this point, and everything he has loved is destroyed or eaten or taken by the evil welfare state, because the evil welfare state is coming, taking all the poor billionaires stuff and all the poor rich people stuff and all the stuff that landed money, all the proper classy stuff that has been eaten up by the welfare state to give to all the gimmies, who, as well as all the stupid dumb poor people, is also all the stupid dumb foreign people who are flocking in to the country like flies, it says. I mean, it keeps going on and on and on about all these backwards nations, and the African. Did you know that their kids reach sexual maturity at 9, so they're going to outbreed us? And the Asians reach sexual maturity at 12, and so every 9-year-old African in the book is pregnant, who's a woman, and it's every disgusting right-wing talking point. And for example, public schools get abolished. So this woman, she sends her children to state school. And within a year, the 13-year-old boy has been arrested for vandalism. The 14-year-old girl has had an abortion, and the 16-year-old boy has been done for armed robbery. The head of the school he went to decides to take on one of these state schools, and within 2 weeks, he has been stabbed 2,000 times, kicked and punched and crucified. They turned Kensington Gardens into a hypermarket. Every bit of land everywhere, all the beautiful things in England have been built up with big skyscrapers because of all them foreigners coming in and everybody taking the welfare state, and nobody works. And if they have a job, they're always on strike, and everything is destroyed and terrible and to really ludicrous extremes. But Charlie doesn't feel any of this because he's in his little bedsit with Charlotte. He only feels it when he leaves the room because the old landlady's gone, and now there's an Indian family moved in, and it's like the one lady left, and in came a man, his wife, their 16 daughters, their auntie and their uncle. Yeah, it's always, and the house now smells of nauseous curry. It's always talking about the nauseous curry. But he doesn't feel it because he's with Charlotte all the time, and in fact, he creates a little heaven on earth in a church called St. Jude's. And this is what is weird about the book. You think all the other stuff. No, this is what is weird. Because the St. Jude's, St. Jude, the patron saint of the impossible, they make this thing called the Impossible Club. And it's only possible to make the Impossible Club because everyone's on welfare. So they have time to share their resources and their skills to make this church into a beautiful, warm, cosy place. And what's more, they all bring things from their cultures. So it's a multicultural melting pot. And so as the book has been railing and railing and railing against all these cultures, the main character has created a multicultural haven, which is lovely in the book. And he's never actually said all of this racist stuff. It's just all the other characters and the narrator constantly. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of it. And then at the end, the government give up basically and are going to call in the Chinese communists, set up work camps. And so the people revolt, they lock them in the Royal Albert Hall and create a cabinet of comedians. And now they're run by comedians. And all of a sudden, all of the noble, public school bred, patriotic people from around the world who have emigrated because they were so cruel to the poor, landed gentry, are all going to come back and save England. Which I find funny because if Oliver Other had seen what the Eton and It's Like have done to the country now, like it's not the public school kids saving it, that's for sure. But they're all going to come back and save it. But at this point, Charlie dies, and he leaves a 80-page note before he dies, setting out the perfect thing. And this is weird. So Charlie, our wonderkind, has basically been saying all these things that have happened to England, every way it's been destroyed, every way that the book's been ranting and ranting and ranting about is good, because it's brought England to its knees and it can now rebuild itself as a Christian communist society, which is a society where everybody wants to share rather than being forced to. Essentially like his church hall haven, but all over. And what's more, because he believes that Britannia, and he always calls it Britannia, is an exceptional place full of where exceptional people come from, they're going to lead the way for the rest of the world into a future of shared Christianity. And it's weird because even though there is a religious element to it, the sort of the ultimate way of structuring society is really open, really multicultural, really progressive, in a book that's just been ranting against those things for so long. And it's a very peculiar. I wonder who Oliver Other was, but that was those three books. I've talked about them for a long time because they're so weird, because a lot happens. Anyway, next. Low Moon by Jake. Jake is a cartoonist. He draws these cartoons. The best one was this sort of one about, there was these two slapstick stories going on. One happened on this side of the page, one happened on this side, and it was two slapstick murders at the same time. My problem with this is most of it is pictures, and I don't understand pictures. They were very cool, and I quite liked what I got, but I didn't get loads because I just don't get pictures. And the last thing I read was The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffman by Angela Carter. No Nights at the Circus, to be honest, but it was good. So the city in South America, just the city, has been attacked by Dr. Hoffman, and he has machines that create weirdness and weird psychological things and dreams and things. He can destabilize reality, and he keeps shooting it at this city, and the city is getting destabilized because they just don't know what's real anymore. And even when they do, it's weird things are happening, and their cathedral gets up and dances and explodes as a fireworks and disappears and is no more, and shadows become people and time becomes celery and all this. And the minister, who's very stalwart, he only believes in reality, and he won't budge. So he gets the guy called Desidero to go and kill Dr. Hoffman, and it's kind of like Heart of Darkness. Thing is, though, it's also a picaresque kind of novel. So Desidero goes to different people and becomes different people as he gets closer and closer to Hoffman. He connects with his ancestry, the river folk, who he's almost forced. He's forced to marry a 9-year-old girl who uses a fish as a dolly, and in fact she does sexual things on him, and then they all plan to eat him. So yeah, a lot of the things that happen are weird and sexual, and it's almost like it's surreal, but it's that very sexual surreal. There's another character who just travels the world looking for the disgusting, the libidinous, and the decadent. I don't know. It wasn't the best. Partly because Dr. Hoffman wasn't the source of all these surreal things. It seems to be a very surreal world without Dr. Hoffman in it anyway. So he gets there, and Dr. Hoffman's not really that interested in making weird worlds anymore. He's just sort of doing it because he's doing it. It's all a bit... Yeah, it's not my favourite Angela Carter, though it's still enjoyable when you read it. Though, yeah, there's a lot of rape and cannibalism. There's quite a lot of cannibalism for one book, and just odd stuff in it. And if you're in the mood for odd stuff, yeah, it's right. So they were the books I read. I didn't see as much theatre. First thing I saw was called Fire, Embers, Ash, and that was about a really interesting thing, actually. An all-woman bomber brigade in the Second World War on the Soviet side. And it was all about these women who set it up and stories from them. And also, because they were given all the hand-me-downs and all the rubbish, they had to develop their own tactics. So they were given these awful sort of wooden trainee planes. And they were too noisy to do a good bombing raid. So they had to switch off the engine, glide down, drop the bomb, switch on the engine, and come up. And so they would come out of nowhere. And so the Nazis called these the Nachthexen, or the Night Witches, because you'd just be doing your thing, and then all of a sudden, this thing would be flying away. Half of the Night Witches died during the war, which, to be honest, considering Russian casualties, is pretty average, to be honest. And it was very well done. They used this little model and shadows for the flying bits, and it sounds cheesy, but it was peculiarly effective and really good. So that was great. Next thing I saw was called Dear Adult. It was by Wency Lamb and had there was other performers. It was essentially about your inner child, and the inner child was played by, I've got to look this up here, Maggie Chen Locke. And she was astonishingly lifelike as a child. It was almost hard to believe it wasn't a child, except that a real child would have been a bit, stage-trained child would have been a bit more unnatural. It just seemed like there was a real 4-year-old girl playing on the stage. And it was all about getting in touch with your inner child and how your inner child looks after you, as well as you looking after it. And it was very sweet. And it was only a 20-minute long dance thing, and there were people sobbing by the end of it. It really did touch some people. It didn't touch me quite as much, because mainly I was going, wow, she is so good at playing a child. But yeah, there was that. So the next thing I saw was at the very unusual location of Trellick Tower. It was called DIY. It was by this group called SPID. And they specialise in plays and things about housing injustice. They had their home at the bottom of Kensal House, but even though they raised £2.5 million, the council took too long to get around to fixing it, and they don't have a home anymore. So they tour. This month they're going to the Bush Theatre and to V&A. I saw them at Trellick Tower, and it was a history of social housing, which was interesting, but it wasn't very good. All the performers were reading out scripts. Some of them sounded like this. They lost the pages. I'm sure one of them was stoned, because he kept going. It was very bad, and it left me in a really awkward position, because I had to write a review for something about a topic that I feel quite strongly about, housing and stuff, by a group who, they did the Burning Tower, the big Grenville Tower play a few years ago. So by a group that have done some really important work on this, but this was bad. It was like, I don't want to feel like I'm kicking a dead puppy. And basically, I front-loaded the review with how I thought what they were doing was a good thing, and the story was good, and then I just put a little bit in there about it's really, really bad though. That was that. Also, Trellick Tower stinks. There you go. That was my January. February, I've got some things planned. My sister is giving birth. I've got the laughing baby, so I can learn about how babies laugh, or why babies laugh. I haven't started it yet. There's all sorts of things going on. I'm going to be mysterious about it for now, but you'll see. Have a lovely one.